Hello and welcome to the Rugby Paper Roundup. I am your host Ben Jaycock, and ahead of England's big match against Fiji on Saturday, we thought who else to have on the podcast than Fiji's joint all-time top try scorer, former Leicester Tigers winger Nemani Nadolo. England, of course, kicked off their autumn last weekend with a dominant victory over Australia, but Fiji provided a different test to Steve Borthwick's side. Nemani, great to have you on. How excited are you for Saturday's game?
Mate, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been a while. So, look, really excited. Fiji get to play, get to taste Northern Hemisphere style of rugby, and what better way than have a kick, to start it off against England, who I thought played really well against a Wallaby team, which I was pretty disappointed with. But it's a great test for the Fijian lads, or our lads, and we've beaten them before. So, it's one of those things where, you don't want to take Fiji lightly, anymore, because, they're a team that can now beat anyone on their day, and we've seen that.
Absolutely. England obviously learned that the hard way going into the World Cup, where Steve Borthwick's side's preparations were completely derailed at Twickenham. I was there that day, and it was a miserable performance from England, but Fiji were just spectacular, as you can imagine. Nemani, what can we expect from Fiji? This is obviously Fiji's first game of the autumn, but looking at their previous results, 5 wins on the spin, Pacific Nations Cup champions, world's number 9 ranked in the world at the minute, ahead of the likes of Italy and Wales. What do you think that the Twickenham crowd can be in store for?
Oh, look, I think the Fiji team now, they've been together, they've played a few more tests than I guess when I was playing. I think this team's a very rounded team. They've got all the European players back. As you probably know, watching it from that side, your Tuta Waningolos and a lot of your Bill Mutters. These guys are all piling their trade in France. So during the PNC, it was more of the Fiji Drua side, or the Super Rugby sort of players. But we've got that luxury now where we can sort of pick from Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere. And it just so happens that this tour, there's a big call up of inclusions of players that are playing in Europe. And look, like I said, the Fijian team, one thing that really impresses me is the guys that are coming in that might get their crack, and hopefully we might see them play this weekend.
Yeah, exactly, because it's just great. Hopefully, like you said, that Fiji will have their full strength team out. They often do play against these tier 1 nations, but don't have access fully to their players. But with this match in the international window, that should help massively. What should England, not underestimate? Obviously, are there any areas where you think Fiji can get at Steve Borthwick's men after watching England in action the last times that they've played?
Look, I don't think Australia sort of tested them physically. I think, I know a team like England will really test, will play the structured game, try and kick it down their path, kick it behind them. The old cliche of how to play a Fijian side or an Islander team is to kick it back and attack, as a defence line. So, look, I really think where Fiji could probably, utilise, or I guess maximise their chances, is in attack. They're getting over the gain line. If we can keep those tackles legal, when you got guys like Tusova, running the ball, Bill Mutters, these guys, and then you got Tuta Wanigolo, who I think right now is probably one of the informed wingers in world rugby. It's a great opportunity for them to really bring that physicality. But then again, I know someone like Steve Borthwick, who I've had time with, and they love that, particularly him. He loves that physicality, and they're not going to take a backward step. But, I just feel that Fiji, if they can just pile the pressure, in the physicality department, I think, they'll have a good shot at winning this.
Yeah, exactly. It's a completely kind of unique test for England. No one hits as hard as the Fijians, and all that kind of Fijian flair that you mentioned there. there's so many great players to watch, and they're obviously renowned for playing such an attractive, expansive style of rugby. But what about the kind of the nuts and bolts of this Fiji team? You said that they're a very well-rounded side. What's their scrum line out more like? Are they up to scratch?
Yeah, I mean, like for a standard of how far Fiji's come, I think their set pieces is sound. Then again, look, you're coming up against an England team that this is their bread and butter, So I think if in order for us to set England, to keep up with the pace, I think we're going to have to do it for 80 minutes straight. I think this Test match is going to be won in the 80th minute. And England, when they're playing at home in front of the Twickenham, they've got that crowd that can back them. So, yeah, and that's another thing for the boys. They've just got to. If there's another way to win in England, they've done it in Twickenham, is to silence that Twickenham crowd. But look, it's a great challenge for our boys, particularly in the set piece and up front. We all know that in the Northern Hemisphere, it's predominantly forwards rugby, tech, set piece sort of style. So, but in saying that, on our side, I'd like to think that we've got some good players that can cater for that. There's a young kid that's in the squad. He may get a debut, who's a former Leicester Tigers Academy under-20s for England. I'm excited to see him play. When he was in the academy when I was at Leicester Tigers a few years ago, and even then I was trying to get him to come over to Fiji. So it's good to see him make that pledge to the motherland, and hopefully he gets on, and it's going to be a great game for him. But yeah, I'm really excited with how the set piece goes. I'm not going to lie, for one game I'm going to wake up for. It'll be about 2-3 in the morning. So, going to be good.
Nice, yeah, exactly. And it's, obviously the last time the two teams played was during the World Cup in that quarter-final game, 30 points to 24 to England. A real thriller, and it was only Owen Farrell's penalties and his drop goals that eventually got England over the line. It was a really kind of tense match. Completely different England team, though, pretty much. I mean, you look at the names that played in that match, likes of Johnny May, Joe Marchant, Manu Tuilagi, Elliot Daly, Farrell, Courtney Laws, Dan Cole, Joe Marler, Carl Sinclair, Billy Vinapola, Danny Kerr. I mean, it was only 2 years ago, but all those guys aren't in the squad for a variety of reasons. It's also a bit of a kind of an unfamiliar Fiji team, I think, for a lot of people up here in the north. You got guys like Semi Randrandra, Lavani Bhatia, Albert Tuisui, Wasea Naisalevi, who are all kind of aging. They're into their mid-30s now, but there's still that Fijian flair with the likes of Bill Matter, you mentioned at Bristol Bears. You've got Calaveti Ravovo as well, who can play outside centre or on the wing. He's impressed massively at Bristol. One of the leading Prem's top try scorers actually the last couple of years. And then you got the guy that kind of pulling it all together, Caleb Muntz at fly half. He only 26. He scored 15 points against England in that win just before the World Cup. He's going to hopefully knit it all together for you guys. How do you kind of assess Fiji's backline and the potential of it under his kind of stewardship?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think to have someone like Caleb Muntz, steering the ship, in the backline or through the whole team. I think the one person that's going to really complement him is Rayasi. He plays his rugby at Vans, I think. Oh no, I could be wrong. Bordeaux Beg. So he's a guy too that he played his debut against Australia and played really well. But I just think for me, Caleb Muntz doesn't need to do much. And I've said this for years. If you're playing 10 with the amount of flair and strike power you have outside you, as long as he does his job in terms of clean passes, kicks when he needs to kick, I think the damage is going to be done outside him. And I've always been a big believer that if you're playing 10 for Fiji, you just got to be good at doing your basics. Put the guys in the right holes, and that Fijian flair will come. So And then you've still got Isaiah Armstrong-Ravula, who's, he was the incumbent 10 here while Caleb Muntz was still here. So, look, across the park, I think we're I reckon we're pretty well grounded. Particularly, one thing that sort of let us down over the years is the kicking game. As we know, rugby's gone towards that now. There's a lot more kick chasers, and particularly a team against England. They're a team that's going to get into that kick battle. They're going to want to, hope Fiji tap out first, and stuff like that. So, for me, it's Caleb really needs, for me, just to be focusing on that mind game. And this, with the guys that are in that England team, I reckon it's going to be a game of chess, if that makes sense. They're going to try and play strategic. And I just hope Fiji don't clock out. I just hope Fiji can, stick it to them and attack when they need to attack. But also, they've got the capability as well to be able to play that kicking game. And it's just one thing I learned about my playing time in England is you've got to be patient in those boring kickbacks because eventually it's going to pay off. And, I was against it until I moved to the Tigers, until I learned until I learned about it and the reason why they do it. I love it. I think it's great. So, and it bores people out. It bores teams out. It might even bore the crowd as well. But, but the outcome is what you want, and that's to gain territory, then eventuates into points. So, yeah, play the patient game, and when it's time to strike.
That's such a good point. I mean, that is the Steve Borthwick way, isn't it? Kind of that kind of kick first mentality, dominate the aerial game, and that's obviously what England did so well last weekend against Australia. And I do imagine that they'll go back to that again when those big wingers, those big back three they had. Tom Roebuck, Freddie Stewart, Tommy Freeman as well. Obviously he was playing 13 last week, but he's obviously a 6'3", 6'4". Then on the other wing, Emmanuel Feiwa-Boso is great in the air, and you've got a lot of the more kind of dynamic back rowers feeding off that ball once they get it back on their side, and then you see the likes of Ben Earl, Henry Pollock, who just thrive in open space. I think England will try and keep a lid on Fiji's kind of expansive play. I mean, if the game opens up, that's obviously when Fiji are at their best, and England could be vulnerable. So I think England will just try and cut that down as much as possible. But I mean, I think the most impressive part of that England performance was right at the end, that devastating driving maul, which they took from practically their own Australia's 22-metre line, and they mauled it all the way over the line, which was just so impressive to do that to a tier one modern day forward pack. It just never happens, and to do that in a test match at that stage of the game as well was just so impressive. So I think England will go to the driving maul, and they'll try and dominate Fiji as much as they can up front. But I think you're right. The last sort of 20 minutes, the final quarter, is when the game will probably be decided. I expect Fiji to pose a real threat. So Nemani, obviously Fiji are now back-to-back Pacific Nations Cup champions. Like I said before, ahead of Italy and Wales in the world rankings. So for those that don't know, Pacific Nations Cup is the kind of second-tier competition below the Rugby Championship, which obviously features South Africa, Australia, New Zealand and Argentina. It's been around since 2006, and between 2006 and 2010 it was dominated by the junior All Blacks and the New Zealand Maori teams until they left in 2010. Since then, though, Fiji have won 7 out of 15 titles. And it's obviously, like I said, they won the last 2, beat Japan in this year's final. Nemani, Fiji have got the quality. They've got obviously an amazing fan base. As you see the games in Super Rugby, how great it is to have games in Suva, and it's just an amazing rugby nation that is just so probably underappreciated by world rugby. Do you think it's time for Fiji to join the Rugby Championship potentially, bump that up to 5 teams, and then so they can compete on a regular against the best teams in the Southern Hemisphere?
Yeah. I think it's time. I think, like you said, they've won it 7 times, since 2010. It's a great competition. I spent majority of my international career playing in it. I just don't see it being as competitive as it used to be. For whatever reason, obviously Tonga's and Samoa's performance has sort of dipped over the last few years, which, realistically, it's only been a Japan Fiji sort of final. And, it's good to see the likes of Canada and the US come in as well. I think, there's got to be a competition for that. But I think it is time. I think it is time for Fiji to be recognised to be in one of those in the championship or whatever it's called now. I heard, I've been told that next year it's no more. New Zealand's going away to wherever, but I still think we're probably the more dominant second tier nation. I think with the resource that we have, look, Japan, they've dipped as well. So for whatever reason, but I purely think that, yes, I get it. It's a from a market and a financial point of view, and if that's been considered as well, then Fiji won't be able to do it, right? But I think Fiji, we've seen it now. We've beaten Australia, we've beaten England, we have what it takes to play with the likes of those countries now. So, we see that. I see a little bit of us. I see a little bit of Fiji and the Drua. I see that through the Hagueras and the Argentinians. When they started and they came up, yes, they weren't too well. Now they're beating New Zealand. They're beating South Africa. Well, not South Africa, but you get what I mean. They're becoming very competitive. And then come World Cup, a lot of the championship teams are all either quarterfinals or not. Obviously the last World Cup, Fiji kicked Australia out. So, I really think it's time that we revisit that. I think the problem we have is just there's a lot of talk and a lot of this and that, and I get it. After living in Fiji, since living in Fiji the last 4 months now, it does come down to finances. It does come to resources and making sure you have the right, accessibilities to things like stadiums and stuff. So until we get that sorted, there's a reason why we're not there yet. And I don't think it's got to do with the rugby. I think it's got to do with more of the infrastructure and stuff. And I think once we can nail that, I think, we'll be on our way. And that goes for sevens as well. We should be having a sevens tournament here. But again, infrastructure is not up to scratch for World Rugby to allow a team like the Springboks or allow a team like the All Blacks to come. Or the Wallabies for that matter.
Yes, it's such a shame. I mean, it's absolute travesty that Fiji is such a great rugby nation, produce such amazing rugby players, and have done for so long. Just frustratingly ignored, exploited. Like you said, teams very rarely visit. I mean, fair play to Scotland for going this year, but Fiji beat Scotland, which that's another one that another scalp that Fiji have taken. I read that England have only ever been to Fiji once in 1973 on a tour. There's reports that next year's Nations Cup match, Fiji will be at home to England, but at Twickenham. Yeah, so, makes sense of makes sense of that. What do you think the Nations Championship will do for Fiji, being invited part of the 12-team tournament with the elite of World Rugby and kind of every 2 years to be a part of that? Obviously, it's Fiji, Japan, and then the 4 from the Rugby Championship and the 6 from the Six Nations. So, what do you make of that new competition coming in next year?
I think it's great. I think it's a way. First of all, financially, it's going to be rewarding for the country. Obviously, in saying that, I'm assuming all the games will be played in Europe. Or they played at home. If we get a few games at home, that'd be great. That'll inject some money back into the country. But I think it's like I said, man. We're progressing slowly, and when you put us in that, it's like having a northern tour. It's like having what we call it a northern tour. Every 2 years. I think that's but with quality sides. I would go one better and say that we're probably more competitive than Japan. And I just think the difference between Japan and us is not what's on the field; it's what's in the bank account. So, and I guess Now, let's face it, it's the market in Asia where we can make money as well. So it's all about money making. But yeah, I just think for Fiji to be invited or to be playing in that competition, it's going to be great, not only for the unions, for the players, but also it gives Fiji great competition. Then, come World Cup time, rather than always getting knocked out of the quarterfinals, who knows? We might get knocked out in the semis or the bronze or, dare I say, World Cup final. But until we get more exposure like that, I just think it's it's going to be where we are. But I think it's great. I think I'd love to see Fiji play the Springboks. I think last time Fiji hardly plays the Springboks since 2007 World Cup.
Yeah.
So, it'd be a great spectacle. Imagine the Springboks coming over here for a test match. The country will go into lockdown, I tell you.
It's just amazing the passion that Fiji have for rugby. It's second to none. It really is. I mean, people talk about how much of a religion rugby is in New Zealand, but Fiji is on another level. I think I read something like 1 in 270 people are registered rugby player in New Zealand. In Fiji, it's like 1 in 10. It's just everywhere. Tell us about that, the love for the game in Fiji and how much it means to people.
It's crazy. I mean, like I said, I've just moved here about 4 months ago with my family and I, and rugby's everywhere. Like, rugby's mad here. They did a stats, right? They did a stat. So a team like the Fiji Drua, they contributed in 1 year over $108 million to the GDP of Fiji GDP. So that's like, I think, 0.8%. So can you imagine a franchise contributed $108 million to Fiji's GDP? That's ridiculous, right?
That's awesome.
And we're not even, we didn't make, and we probably had our worst year this year. So, but the love for the game is, it's funny because when you're playing, you don't really read the comments and you read the stuff. But once you're on this side, man, you realize how passionate the Fijians are with their rugby, and I'm proud and I feel like I'm privileged. I get to coach professionally here in Fiji. I always said, I wish these guys were around when I was playing because I'd be living here, but fate had it the other way, and like I said, I'm here. I'm just loving it here, and I remember, I'll tell you a story. The Fiji were playing Canada in the PNC just gone, right? This was a Monday, so obviously America's a day behind. We're at the fruit market, so I needed to get in, get out, right? So I've gone in, and I'm looking for all the vendors, going, mate, where's the bananas? I need this, I need that. I've turned around, every vendor, right? And I totally forgot there was a game on. Was around this one TV that was stuck. I was tied up to a pole. And I was like, fuck. Sorry. And I was like, far east, I need some fruit and veggies. Like, guys, someone help me. And then they're all looking at me, looking at the TV, going, mate, you're not watching this? And one of the guys, like, I spotted the one of the vendors, and I was like, mate, I need some apples and bananas quick. And he was so forceful. This is me not even thinking about it. Anyway, so I turned back around when he was packing it, and he literally gave the money. I think I was about $2 short. He's like, forget about it. And he literally wanted to run back to the TV. And I was like, shoot, I've got to go see what these guys are watching. Funny enough, they were watching Fiji play Canada, and I think that already was it Canada or US, and they'd already put they were winning by 50 points.
Wow.
And then I literally was like, mate, they've won the game. Go back to work. So you can imagine, that's how much rugby is big here. So you can stop the day. It's just unfortunate that they played on a Monday, which was, people are trying to go to work and stuff and do some shopping. So, but yeah, a bit of an insight into how we love our rugby here.
That's amazing. That is absolutely fantastic. Oh, amazing. And that brings us on really nicely to the benefits of Fijian Drua, which you can see from this, from Fiji's autumn squads. Obviously, most of it does derive from Fijian Drua's Super Rugby Pacific side. It's looking like a really useful pathway into the national team. Players now being able to go up against, the great sides in New Zealand, like the Hurricanes, the Crusaders, the Blues, Highlanders, and then you've also got the Aussie sides as well. So they're playing regular minutes, I guess, against top class opposition. You recently joined the team as a development coach, so tell us about your role and how much you're enjoying it.
Yeah, mate. So I've been fortunate enough to be taking up a head coaching role in the development squad. So my role here is obviously the developmental academy, as some people say. And we've got a good bunch of boys down here, and also helping out with being assistant to Tim Sampson, who's the assistant coach here, helping out with the back line, particularly with the back three stuff. So, mate, I'm loving it. I love this being back in the environment. When I retired from rugby, I sort of went into the real world, or I went into the workforce, and as much as it wasn't what I wanted to do, I always knew that I wanted to get into coaching. I just didn't know, how, or how long it was going to take, or when. But had conversations with Glenn Jackson and Baden Stevenson and Mark Evans here about coming over, and things just opened up. Anyway, got the opportunity to move the family over, and I keep telling my wife, I keep scratching myself, pinching myself. It's like, mate, I've got the best job in the world. I'm back in the environment where, it's just that environment. It's hard to explain, you know what I mean? Like being a player and then coming and being a coach. Obviously, longer hours, but I'm just so thankful that I'm back in this environment where, I belong, I guess. And for me, to be able to be given an opportunity where I can develop the next, the next Drua talent, or the next bunch of players coming through, it's a great privilege. And, I think for me, it's knowing that if you do it right, that you can see these players go on to play for Drua or play for Fiji. So, it's, mate, it's just, we're in pre-season at the moment. I look at the plan. I look at the planning and, what they're doing. And I was looking, I'm like, Jesus, I did this as well, like back in the days. But, rugby is such a young man's game now. And you see it training, mate, just rocking up to training. I've been smiling from ear to ear for the last few weeks, just, being able to coach and do something I really love. And hopefully, I can progress through. But my biggest passion is always giving back. And there was something I've always wanted to do, was to give back. And whatever that looked like, I didn't know. And fate has it that, I got given an opportunity to come and coach here in Drua. And, mate, Fiji is an amazing place. Like, I grew up in Australia my whole life, and yes, I was born here, but 3 months old, we moved to Oz, right, back in the 80s. So, yes, I look Australian, I look Fijian, but if you hear my accent, the most Australian accent you could ever hear from a Fijian. But, mate, just the lifestyle here is amazing. It's like living in the south of France, just minus I live in the city. It's a bit laid back, but it's, just loving it, mate. Really loving the opportunity.
Oh, definitely. I think Fiji's on most rugby fans' bucket list to get out there and experience the amazing rugby mad nation, which you mentioned. And obviously, it's only Fijian Drua only been around a kind of a handful of years now. But their performances in Super Rugby as a startup have been really impressive. They're taking some big scalps of, you name any of the powerhouses in Super Rugby. The Drua have beaten them. So, like you mentioned, a slightly disappointing 2025 though, finishing 10th, because obviously the Drua made the quarterfinals the previous 2 seasons. So that was a little bit disappointing, wasn't it? But hopefully the Drua can right those wrongs and go for the last 8 again this time round.
Yeah, 100%. I think being in the environment I guess being in that environment now and hearing, what went wrong, what went right for them, I think, everyone was bitterly disappointed, everyone in that building. And, you could feel that sense of, particularly with the coaches that we've got, like, mate, we've got some of the best coaches in the world. And, just to see them, work so hard, and I see it. I've been with them now for the last few weeks, and just seeing them put in the hours, and it's definitely questioned myself. And being a young coach, like, this is what you've got to put in to be successful. And when you got people here that have coached at the international level, you can see the disappointment in their face, but also the boys. I think the boys were more bitterly disappointed than anyone. And I think maybe that had something to do with the transitioning of coaches. But this year things again have been tightened up a lot. In the high performance, I guess, department. With the senior squad and the development squad and the women's squad. So, I think this year was a year to forget. But at the moment we've got, in pre-season at the moment we've got the likes of Frank Lamani, who's a 48 test Fiji international. This is his first time he's doing a pre-season in 8 years. Because he's always been on tour with Fiji. So to have someone like him, do pre-season, and you see the guys really lift, because usually, I guess, they're away with the Fiji tour. So, and I've seen him just drive the standards within the team, and I think the boys have really put in some hard yards this last few days. And here in Fiji, we start really early, so our days start at 6 o'clock because, as you all know, it gets really hot here. So by 10 o'clock we've done our field session. Because the humidity is just ridiculous. It's crazy. And even I'm still getting used to it. Like, people say, "Oh, you're Fijian." I was like, "Yeah, but like, I'm that plastic, what they call plastic version. I grew up in Australia, mate." But mate, it's yeah, like I said, you can see the change, and to have the guys like Frank Lamani there, and a few other guys, Virimi Vakatawa, who's yet to join the squad. They're going to bring a lot of experience and really push some standards for these young guys.
Oh yeah, exactly. I see. Yeah, exciting times hopefully for the Drua. And what's your thoughts on Super Rugby? Obviously you've had the Fijian Drua and Moana Pacifica join, and they've kind of you've seen the South African sides move to the Northern Hemisphere club competitions. So operating with 5 Aussies, 5 New Zealanders, and the 2 kind of Pacific Island sides. Do you think Super Rugby's in a good place at the minute?
Look, I think your dynamics are always going to change when you get rid of something, and I guess for us it's the South African teams. Look, my biggest pet hate, and the one thing I always hate, is when everyone compares competitions to competitions. Right? I've been fortunate enough. I've played in all the competitions besides the URC, and I would never compare the two. Like, I think the Super Rugby Pacifica, I think it's a great brand. I think it plays. It's a quick game. I always call it's the young man's game. Like, it's really quick. I think the ball in play is ridiculous, and I love it. I think it's great. I think it's in a good place. Obviously, we would have loved to have South Africa here. I'd love to see one day down the track where maybe we get 2 South African teams back, like the Cheetahs or the Griquas or something, or someone that could come back to Super Rugby. And you can still have your URC, South African teams, but give those teams like the Cheetahs or something to come back into Super Rugby. I think that'd be great, because that'll add another dimension like we had in the past, where they bring that physicality. So the Suffers can bring, they play a very hard game. I'm not saying that we do. We play. I think we're more quicker, but yeah, I think it's in a good place. And particularly when you have a team like the Drua and the Moana Pacifica, who, it's such a cultural team. It's not like yes, it's a franchise, but it's more than that. And I get to see that with the Drua, where we pack out the stadiums every week. And I've been blessed enough to be doing commentary the last few weeks, and it's just the best environment. And people always say, people always say here that you haven't been to a Super Rugby game if you haven't been to a Drua game yet. So I encourage people to get down there because it's the best. It's the best feeling. And yeah, but to answer your question, mate, I think it's in a good place. I think without comparing it to any other competition, I think this year was probably the best standard of rugby we've seen in a long time. And I think we saw that, go into the championship as well. But yeah.
No, fantastic. Yeah, hopefully it carries on. It carries on its momentum because it once was, and it hopefully we'll get back to being one of the premier competitions in world rugby. Obviously, Nemani, obviously you're one of the biggest wingers the Premiership has ever seen. I see 6'5". At the minute, is it 137 kilograms? Is that right?
Yeah, in my fit days, yeah.
Yeah. What we looking at now?
I'm north of 150 at the moment.
150. Wow.
Yeah, but
so 137 is in old money is 21 and a half stone. So that's pretty good in your pump.
Mind you, I've just started pre-season here. I've started walking to training. This is how eager I've been getting back into the environment. So I walk to training every morning, which is about 37, sort of 40-minute walk. So I get my skin folds done. So I'm trying to put myself on a bit of a pre-season myself. Minus the running, but like I said,
yeah, don't be silly.
You don't realise coaching is just as hard if you're unfit moving. So hopefully, I'll lose some. I'm sure I'll shed some kilos in the next few months. I've just got to lay off the beers. The beers taste nice here.
Oh, I bet they do. But we are seeing. I mean, not quite as big as you, but we are seeing some bigger wingers in the modern game. We obviously like Duane van der Merwe, now Scotland's all-time try scorer. Obviously, then you've got guys like James Lowe, Tommy Freeman. They're big guys as well. So you are seeing a lot more kind of in the ilk of people like yourself. Then you've obviously still got those like diminutive guys like Cheslin Colby, Darcy Graham. But it's great to have that kind of contrast, isn't it? Because it was known as being kind of one of the smallest players on the pitch, and then Jonah Lomu came around and changed everything, and was kind of the trailblazer for the big wingers that could just run over people. But now you're seeing more like the Colbys and the BLBRA as well for France. But then you got Penaud on the other wing for France, who's quite a big guy himself. So it's great, isn't it? How the position evolves.
Yeah, true, right, mate, and I think it'll always still evolve. Like, I felt like it always went in patches. Like, there's where, there was always one time, there was always big wingers. And then after that, it went to smaller wingers, nippy wingers. And then it went back to bigger wingers. I think now we've got a good balance. Like you said, all the names that you've mentioned. There's a great balance, and they can all move. They can all play. They can all kick. Gone are the days where wingers were just finishers. There's more to it now. And, and that's really exciting to watch. I believe I'm a big believer that the wingers or the back three have a very important role, and you're not just, like I said, you're not just running the ball. There's more to it. So loving the size difference, but also they're just as potent as each other. So yeah, it's good to see.
We spoke at great length about how popular the men's game is in Fiji, but what about women's rugby, Nemani? Obviously, a successful World Cup, beating Wales to finish third in their pool. Has that kind of gathered momentum at all since the World Cup in Fiji?
Look, women's rugby is growing heaps here. So whenever there's a competition, there's always a women's competition. I think the best thing that's done for that is it's given interest to a lot more girls to want to play. Now, our problem is we've only got one professional team. And so a lot of it, the professionals more. They from there they go into the to the national setup. But what we're seeing a lot now is a lot of clubs are now scouting girls to go and play, which is good to see. So whether it be rugby league, the dark side, or club rugby in Brisbane or New Zealand, we're seeing a lot of these girls now getting rewarded, by heading overseas, whether it's, like I said, club rugby or professional or the dark side. So, I would have loved, we would love to have them all at the Drua, but reality is we can't. So, but what you're seeing, like I said, you're seeing a big influx of girls, a lot of interest to go overseas.
Oh, definitely. That's fantastic. Really good to hear. I like the reference to the dark side for rugby league. That's fantastic. So, Nemani, but obviously, we'd say, sorry to go back to it, but during your playing days, if you were around about 140 kilograms, it's been like a real big trend at the minute across like rugby social media about how many calories rugby players eat per day during their training regime, and like it goes. Obviously, some players can burn up to like 5,000 calories in training. How many calories do you think you were taking in when you were at Leicester Tigers and with Fiji?
Mate, to be fair, not much.
Oh, really?
If I could probably get around 2,000 calories, I'd be happy.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So, mate, you got to remember, I'm a big guy, so my metabolism is pretty slow. So I'd do it in phases too. I'd fast for like till the lunchtime, and particularly like in the summer, you don't eat as much. But mate, I've seen the trend now. There's a lot of these guys that burn 5,000-6,000 calories. Like I'd probably on average burn about 5,000, 4,000 a day, but I'd probably eat 2 to 3. So yes, I'd love to eat a bit more, but I just don't. I see something and I put on weight. So my whole career was always battling with the weight side of things. But look, I played for 15 years, so I can't have been that bad.
Yeah, you were certainly very good, and you got a safe space for those ice cold beers as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, see, I can do it now without feeling guilty, but I've got to work 10 times harder. Whereas before, you could have 10 beers and you'd burn it off on Monday on a watt bike.
Yeah, exactly. So just finally, ahead of Saturday's game, Nemani, what's your prediction? What would you think is going to happen at Twickenham?
Oh, look, I guess the Fijian lads are not favourites, and so they should. So England, obviously going to be favourites for this. I'm going to call an upset. I'd love to. I'm going to Fiji by 5.
Fiji by 5. Fantastic. Well,
imagine that would be cut up and put all over the media.
Oh, we certainly will. We certainly will. I'm gonna say England by 15. I think. I just think England played really well last week against Australia. Yeah. I don't think they're going to underestimate Fiji whatsoever. I think it's just that final quarter where the game will just open up a little bit too much for Fiji, and maybe like in terms of fatigue and things, England will just pull away with their kind of superior bench. I think that would just be the difference.
Yeah, and I agree to some sense, but someone like Steve Borthwick would be reminding this team what happened to them 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And definitely. I've been in a room where Steve is, we've lost, say we lost to Bristol the year before. That whole week was printed of, Pat Lamb's face and all these guys' faces on there. And like literally, so it's funny when, this was coming up and I was thinking what to say. I was like, man, I just know Borthers would have Josh Tuisova's face, Bill Mutter's face all over the team room and just, trying to hype up the lads. So he'll make sure they won't forget about, the last time they played in Twickenham.
Oh, 100%. Well, Nemani, thank you so much for joining us. That was a brilliant chat. I hope to have you on again soon. But no, thank you everyone for joining us today of the latest edition of the Rugby Paper Roundup. You can obviously find the Rugby Paper in your local store. on the digital edition online, or hit the QR code in the corner to subscribe. Thank you very much for your time. See you next week.